And today is kind of a special honor for me. I spend a lot of my time behind the scenes doing communications, but today I get to introduce my boss to this wonderful group of friends. Rob Sand was recently dubbed by The Atlantic as the most dangerous Democrat in Iowa. He was he was first elected in 2018, becoming the first Iowa Democrat to be a Republican incumbent in 36 years. Prior to serving as the state auditor, Rob worked as the chief public corruption prosecutor in the Iowa Attorney General's office, where he prosecuted both Republicans and Democrats for public corruption. And his book, The Winning Ticket, actually describes the case where he uncovered the largest lottery rigging scandal in American history. And in the first term as state auditor, Rob has uncovered more misspent money than any other state auditor in their first term, creating the Public Innovations and Efficiencies program called PI. The program is so successful at saving tax dollars that the Republican state auditor of Mississippi copied it. Auditor Sand was born and raised in Decorah, Iowa, and lives in Des Moines with his wife, Christine, and two sons. Everyone, please welcome State Auditor Rob Sand.
Good morning. Happy to be here with you all. I didn't know what I was going to talk about today. I thought probably I'd talk about what's going on in the auditor's office. And just as Dan and I pulled in at about the same time and started walking in, and I don't think there's anything I can talk about other than RFRA. And so this is not going to be something that I have thought through. You can see CJ starting to sweat as my communications director right now. I am going to kind of wing it here. I'm going to stitch together a little piece of things I've talked about before, but I'm going to be really open and honest with all of you about my feelings. And it's going to be complicated because we're going to be talking about religion in a room full of people that religion has been used to oppress. Wrongly oppress. And I know that a lot of you probably have complicated histories with it, and so I apologize in advance if any of this comes out wrong. My faith is deeply important to me. I was born and raised in Decorah, one older sister. Dad's from Decorah too. His parents are from Ashen, 10 miles away. Probably haven't heard of it unless you travel the state for the Best Burger of the Year award, which, have you noticed it always changes? There's not that many new restaurants popping up around Iowa, but they always find a new place for the best burger, which I kind of appreciate. We're highlighting different excellent burgers. So deep roots in Northeast Iowa. Grew up in a family where church was important. We went every Sunday. You know, did confirmation, did all that. And my dad's family, you know, was around. We had aunts and uncles in Decorah. My grandparents lived there. When the Sand family gets together for a meal, we don't just say grace, we sing it. My second son, we have two boys. My second son's name is Axel. When my wife said, "How about Axel?" I went, I was actually not excited about that. I was like, that's a little too far off I've never met an Axel, right? We'll get a little bit normal, at least not unfamiliar. But then I looked it up in our big book of Scandinavian names, because of course I'm Norwegian, because I'm from Decorah, and I'm Lutheran. And my wife is of Danish descent. And it said, Father of Peace. And I immediately couldn't say no, because that's straight to me out of the Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. So we have Axel. And he's actually a peacemaker. You wouldn't believe it. I was really upset with Tate yesterday for calling his brother names. This is before they left for school. And, you know, I did what a parent does. If I hear one of my kids calling the other one hurtful names, I get upset. And so I go in and I say things. And after a little while, Axel said, "Well, Dad, if I called Tate names, shouldn't I be in trouble too?" Yes, if you did call him names, you are in trouble too. Okay, well then I think I'm in trouble too. Okay. Following right after his name. So when our family gets together, we're singing grace. My son is named literally because, named his name literally because it comes out of the Sermon on the Mount, right? My faith has always been incredibly important to me. And I remember there was a time when I was in high school where I really struggled with the idea of whether or not I could call myself a Christian, not because of anything that I found in the Bible. Everything I read in the Bible, I was like, sign me up. New Testament, let's be clear. Old Testament gets a little tricky. But everything that was coming out of Jesus's mouth, I was like, this sounds like the right thing to say. This sounds like the right way to live, right? But in high school, I would see Fred Phelps in the Westboro Baptist Church on television, allegedly representing Christianity by protesting soldiers' funerals and protesting homosexuality. And I was really confused. And then I would see doctors in Kansas, 2 of them being murdered for providing reproductive health services. And I was like, I've read the book. The thou shalt not kill part is super clear. And the people who want to point to things about abortion, you can argue that a particular verse is read that way, but you can also just read it and say, I don't see how that has anything to do with it. And so that left me confused. And then Matthew Shepard was killed. And I remember people saying, well, he, just making negative comments about who he was, as though that somehow in any way made him less of a child of God. And I got further confused. And I struggled with it for a long time because I thought, how can I go to people and represent myself as being a Christian if they see what I see out there in the world about what Christianity is? I don't want them to think that I'm like Fred Phelps. And eventually I hit the point where I thought, well, what I think Christianity is really important to me. I think it's the right way to live, to love other people, to welcome other people. And if I don't hold myself out and live in a way that is reflective of that, then how do I counter what it is that they say Christianity is? If I let them be the only ones who say this is Christianity, the entire message gets lost. And I didn't know what exactly that would mean for me, but I thought, well, I don't want to do that. I want to stand up for what I think it's supposed to be about. And so here I am today, I guess, standing up for what I think it's supposed to be about. And this is what has me tremendously confused, again, about RIFRA. Show me where in the Bible Jesus turned anyone away. Show me. He specifically welcomed, specifically dined, and made a show of doing it for the most rejected people in society. It was his purpose, in part, on earth, to show that they had equal value, that what they chose to do, that what they did, whether it was their choice or not their choice, didn't mean that his love for them was any less, didn't mean that his love for them was any smaller, didn't mean that they were unwelcome. And so I don't understand how you could have a deeply held religious belief that you would turn someone away and base that on Christianity. That makes no sense to me. I'm standing here as someone who cares deeply about my faith and cares deeply about what it means for every single person on this planet. But I know that knowing is hard, especially when you're talking religion. I believe that it can't mean turning someone away, that it can't mean making someone feel unwelcome, that it can't mean saying to someone, no, this is not for you. It's for everyone except for you and people like you. Square that with anything in the New Testament for me, please. I think you're going to have a hard time doing it. I'm sick of this. I've been sick of it since I was in high school. Sick of people taking the faith that is supposed to be the warmest, most welcoming love that any human can ever know and turning it into, twisting it into a way to reject someone. What, because of your own fear of them? Because of your own discomfort? I don't know. Maybe not for most people. Maybe for some people, it's just because that they were taught that, right? But if they don't hear a different opinion, it's hard to unteach it. And so I go around and I talk to people like this. Not, let me be clear about that. I don't mean folks like you. I mean what I'm saying. I texted this to Courtney. You're the only person I had texted that to this week. I had a meeting this, did I just say this week? It was definitely last week. I don't know what day is it again? I think it's Friday. I'm right. I met last week with a group in the office, about 6 conservative pastors. And just before meeting with them, I had met with Rachel Gulick. Anybody know her from Girls Rock? And Rachel and I had this great conversation. And in my subsequent meeting, I made sure to say roughly what I said to all of you. So I want you to know something. And it's not that this is the only kind of group that I'll say that to. I sat in my office with 6 pastors who are conservative pastors, probably who all think that RFRA is a good idea, and emotionally said to them how unwelcome the gay community has been made to feel in the state of Iowa by the current Iowa legislature and Iowa's current elected leadership. And I asked them, well, I didn't ask them. I just said, I don't think that feels like Christianity to me. I don't think that feels like what Jesus would want us to do. It is supposed to be welcoming. It is supposed to be loving. It is supposed to be for every single person. And they didn't start a debate. They didn't just look at the floor. I felt sitting there like there was some acknowledgement of that what I was saying was fair. I don't know how we move past this divide without having these conversations with every kind of group of people that we can. A conversation about being welcoming, making sure that people who hold themselves out as being Christian are welcoming to people in the gay community is not just one to be said to the gay community, but it's one to be said to people who are in that conservative Christian community as well. Because I think in their heart of hearts, they've had that thought. I'm sure they've read their Bibles and come across parts of it that made them think, I don't know if I'm doing that so well. But we can't find our way through this. We can't find our way to stopping this kind of anger and this kind of rejection without having those conversations. Maybe we, you know what? I'm saying we can't do that. Maybe we can. Maybe we can just keep fighting. We have to fight if we have to fight. But there's different ways of fighting, and I tend to think that killing them with kindness works for me anyways, and who I am. I remember that there was a case I knew I was going to lose when I was at the Attorney General's office. It was with a guy who used to be the Attorney General of the state of Iowa, and now I'm blanking on his name. But, you know, Tom Miller was Attorney General for 40 years, so who can remember anyone else anyways? Larry, can anybody give me his last name? Larry? No? He just absolutely slaughtered us with a smile. It was brutal. And I was like, he's totally going to win. And he did. You know, I think there's different strokes for different folks. Whatever works for you, for the way that you want to stand up for your community, for our community, do it. I'm going to keep talking to people. I'm going to keep saying what I have to say. I'm going to keep talking about my beliefs and what I think should be deeply held religious beliefs when it comes to how the gay community is treated in the state of Iowa. And I hope you're going to do the same. There is no giving up on it. I know that. And I want to say this too. of all the women at the Seneca Falls Convention to fight for suffrage for women, one ever lived long enough to see the right to vote, to actually cast a ballot. One. They weren't there because they thought it was going to be easy. They weren't there because they thought it was going to be convenient. They were there because they knew it was right. And they were there because they were willing to do the work. There's a quote I love from the Talmud. And there's a lot of days where I'm not particularly hopeful. And on the days where I'm not particularly hopeful, I remember this one. Do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. It is not yours to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. That to me is a recipe for a life well lived. We can't expect ourselves to win every battle. We can't expect ourselves to make the world perfect. As soon as we make the world perfect, something else would break, right? We just have to keep doing the work that we know is the right work to do and know that we've done our part. Thanks. We've got time for questions about anything. Hey, Lepley.
Great to see you.
You too.
What would you say to the many folks that are our mutual friends, our sort of cohort, who are sick of the legislative environment and who are leaving the state because they feel just exhausted and want their kids to grow up somewhere that doesn't feel so hostile?
Yeah.
What's your take?
So I can't tell anyone. I guess let me start here. Each person knows their own life. They know their own capacity. They know their own state of well-being. And they've got to make decisions that are the right decisions for them. But if they said, give me a pitch, I've got a pitch to give. I do. This is still, there is no erasing that this is still the same state that legalized gay marriage, right? In Varnum as were we second, third? Yeah, this is still the same state, right? We have such a proud history in Iowa of civil rights and realizing that civil rights should be for everyone before everybody else figured it out, right? We desegregated schools 100 years before Brown versus Board of Education, right? So there is this arc in Iowa that is a longer arc than where we are right now that says this is a welcoming state. This is a state that wants people to be here and wants everybody to have equal opportunities to do whatever they want and to live their life and to be free to be who they are and use their God-given talents to do everything for everyone else, right? Does our current leadership reflect that? No, no way. I'm not going to pitch him on that. If I make a pitch, it's because I believe it. I can't make that pitch. Here's the other thing that I would say. We are in a situation where we have seen Democrats and Democratic candidates lose at the top of the ticket now for 8 years straight. And we're tired of it, and we're frustrated by it, and we're hurt by it, right? There are a lot of people whose lives are worse because of it. If you look behind winning and losing, though, there's a different tale that is told. And I tend to talk about this in terms of college football because it kind of makes the most sense with the bowl selection process. If the Hawkeyes go 7-5, but you've been paying attention, and someone says to you, yeah, 7-5, they weren't that good, right? But there were 3 games that they lost by like one weird play, right? Like there was a pick six that gets returned for a touchdown. There's a field goal that gets missed for no good reason. You're like, and then there's one other one where like, I don't know, the starting quarterback had a stomach bug and couldn't play. Like if it weren't for those 3 flukes, you'd be 10-2 and you'd be going to the Orange Bowl and everyone in the entire country would be talking about how great you are. Iowa Democrats have lost a wild streak of close elections. Literally the closest congressional election in American history in 2020. Rita Hart lost by 6 votes, right? And then in 2020 also, Teresa Greenfield, did she lose? Yeah. There was only one Democrat in the United States running for US Senate in 2020 that lost by less than she did. We were the second closest losing state. In 2022, Cindy Axne, running for re-election for Congress in this district, had the closest loss of a Democrat incumbent in the country, 0.7%. There was nobody running for Congress who was already a member who lost by less as a Democrat that year. And then think about this too. We have 6 state offices in Iowa. Me, Tom Miller, Mike Fitzgerald, all basically got half of voters to vote for us in a terrible year for Democratic turnout. Terrible year. Which means that even in a bad year, half of the voters voted for half of the Democrats running for state office. You guys following? This is not a state where there isn't hope. This is not a state that is deep red. When people say that to you, it's because I think they want you to think that way, but the numbers aren't there. This is a state that, short of these little losses, would still look like an incredibly purple state. When we talk about those state offices, I'm a little bit of an anomaly. If we had 1% better vote margin for Tom Miller and Mike Fitzgerald, we'd have an evenly split delegation between both parties for state office. We would be the only country within even being one office off balance in either direction if we had that. Does that make sense? So there's a handful of states, really truly just a handful, where someone like me has bucked the tide. Mostly it's all one party or the other. We were 1% away from being 50-50. I can't tell people what they should do with their own lives, but I know that we have better days ahead of us here in Iowa. And frankly, I think one of the best things we have going for us, unfortunately right now, is the extremism of the policies pursued by the people under the Golden Dome right now. Right? A 6-week abortion ban, school vouchers that are going to suck hundreds of millions of dollars out of our public schools with no accountability. I'm going to try to not get started on that one. Because that bill, we are going to, as we always do, issue audits related to misspent money in public schools, and we are never going to find out that the exact same thing is happening in private schools, not because it's not happening, but because there is no mechanism for accountability under this law. Gutting the auditor's office, right? And then maybe they're going to come back and do it again this year. This is not what Iowans want. And I think that in the very near term, we're going to see things turn around. So that would be my pitch. Who else has got a question? The question is, you know, I do my pie run around the state and how am I getting received in Republican areas? So if anyone's not familiar, in my first term, CJ mentioned this, we started a government efficiency program that's been very successful. It's called PIE, stands for Public Innovations and Efficiencies. And the best part about public innovations and efficiencies is it spells pie. So that the awards that I can give out are actual pies that I then travel the state and eat with our award winners. And it's amazing. It really is a struggle for me on those days where I just have to eat 5 slices of pie as I drive around Iowa. But if someone has to do that for the people of the state of Iowa, I am willing to make that sacrifice. I think part of, I hate what politics is. I love what it can be. And I think that and maybe politics is the wrong word, but our political leadership, I think our leadership at its best is being willing to talk to people that you presume you disagree with, being willing to sit down and engage with people who might not think the same way you do on any number of issues, but rediscovering the fact that, like, okay, you're a person too. So when I travel around the state and I do this, we do the pie tour That's usually about 20, 25 stops a year. And then I also do 100 town halls a year. Lee County has 2 county seats, and so I go to both. That's both because they're county seats, but also because then I can accurately state everyone else is only doing a 99 county tour. Because I'm doing 100, I am the hardest working elected official in the state of Iowa. And I do have folks come out who are Republicans, who are Trump supporters, who are conservative. They come out for a lot of different reasons. Some of them, they bring questions that I know somebody asked them to ask. Some of them, they're just curious. I rarely have instances of antagonism. For the most part, I think people are curious if they're coming out. If they're coming out and they have a question, I've actually had situations where people have listened to the answer and then by the end said, oh, well, I didn't know all that. To which I say, I know. From the nature of your question, I can understand where on the internet you were getting that. And I'm actually really glad that you came out here to talk to me about that, because I'm happy to help people understand what the truth is. We have to center this too. Our political system is broken. There is no good reason on God's green earth that we should be forced to have 2 choices. Does anybody disagree with that? Does anybody here think that their highest calling in life is to be a Democrat or to be a Republican? Why do we allow ourselves to be divided into 2 camps? Why do we allow ourselves to be antagonized and goaded and poked into thinking that everyone over there is evil, right? It's destructive for all of us, for every one of us. It doesn't enable free thinking. It makes people want to just go along with whatever the crowd is, right? And it's very, very, very much contrary to everything that the founders of this country wanted. There's a great quote, I think it's John Adams, something to the effect of, the greatest evil possible in this country is 2 great parties united only in their hatred of each other. Ta-da! Welcome to 2020s, right? We're there. We need to change that. But I think that there's a lot of people out there who, you know, I'm not your average Democrat. When they hear me talk about issues like that, or they hear me talk about something from the perspective of my own faith background, it kind of makes them go, oh, okay. And just a little spark of curiosity happens there. But I think it's in part because I've got the same spark of curiosity for them. One more question, says the boss. Yes.
Are you considering running for governor? No, you need to run for governor.
Thank you. Thank you for the encouragement. He's the guy in the Facebook comments. Okay. I can't get out of my head the fact that Ted Cruz at one point in, like, I think high school had in his high school yearbook, I'm going to go to Harvard College, and then I'm going to go to Harvard Law School, and then I'm going to be in the US Senate, and then I'm going to run for president. I am not Ted Cruz in so many ways. But that's one of them. I didn't grow up being like, I want to be state auditor, right? But I saw an office that I knew could do more for people. And I thought, I want to do that because I want to do more for people. The PI program was really like starting that efficiency program was the thing that made me super excited about this office. That and the fact that I had spent 7 years prosecuting public corruption, working with the auditor's office, because they conduct the public corruption investigations in the state of Iowa. And so their investigations would come and land on my desk. And I got to know people over there. And they too got pissed off when people in positions of trust and power in society misused that trust and power for their own ends. It makes me think, a lot of the work that I've done over the years makes me think of Jesus flipping over the money changers' tables in the temple, calling them a den of thieves, right? So I like the work that I do. they're taking, they're taking away the capacity to do some of that work. And if I can't do that much in the job that I have right now because they keep limiting it, it makes me more inclined to look somewhere else. That said, these are super complicated decisions. And I'll figure it out when it's deciding time. I guess I'll put it that way. Thanks. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.